Hello everybody, Thy Lord Root here, and welcome back to another episode of Back to Basics. So I thought we might actually take care of some of this orbital science here, because we've actually got quite a bit. We have, if we look at our contracts real quick, we have collect science data from carbon, which gives us some 18,000 science, which is great. We also have this contract here for testing the LV909, and we're going to have to be very careful about that. The window is fairly tight for that. And then we also have the ability to test the Scare Bay as well. So I think we should do that. That would be a good way to handle this. And I'm going to go ahead and start out by loading the replacement for this. As it turns out, we now have these FLT 800 pieces here, those tanks. And so I went ahead and constructed this ahead of time. This is the first time I think we're actually putting the materials bay into orbit. And I think that's actually not a bad thing to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and launch. Yeah, I almost thought about putting a probe around the moon, but the probes we have are not really good for that. They don't have SAS, and Bob seems to have snuck in somehow. Let's rectify that, because Bob cannot. I mean, he could technically, or Bill rather, he could technically fly this rocket, but I don't really want him to. I think Lubin is a good candidate for this. So, we will go ahead and get this guy up into orbit. Now, we've done the orbit dance a couple of times, and I think that it's always worth doing again and again. But in this particular case, you want a semi-experienced pilot in charge. So what we're going to do is we're just going to launch. And we are getting pretty close to the limit of this rocket here. However, I think it's worth pointing out that when we get this guy going properly, that we will actually have quite a bit of fun. One of the things I'm trying to do this episode, in which I believe this rocket will do for us, is I'm trying to get ourselves to the point to where we can unlock the upgrade to the Launchpad, which is probably the most accessible part of this. And so what we'll do is we will go ahead and do our pitch program at about 9K or so. Everybody does it at 10K, but I've always preferred to do it at 9K. 9K seems to be a much better deal here. And we will lose a little bit of cash because we are staging this thing. But ultimately, I think we'll be okay. I mean, these guys here are not that expensive. So we're at about 3.5K right now. I think before too long we'll be doing our pitch program. And the main thing here is to make sure that we have as much thrust to weight ratio as we can muster out of this, because this thing, it does have issues orienting itself properly. So before too long, we will begin turning over. And that'll happen pretty soon. Now, ideally, what we do with something like this is we would put a space station up into orbit, and we just take care of that. But as it turns out, I mean, we do sort of have the parts for it. But, and then again, we don't. At any rate, I think Lubin rather, is setting a fairly good, example as a disciple of Jebediah Kerbin. He is flying this thing alright. He may very soon surpass Job. And I think that is important because Job, you know, normally I'd like to keep him alive. I think that one accident with the parachutes that was probably due to time acceleration was a little bit unfortunate. Let's see. We do not have time to apoapsis yet. That could be a bit of a problem. Not too much of one, but certainly, I think, being able to do patched conics is, worth it. And that's going to be what we're going to shoot for after the launch pad. Now, we could send a probe to the moon right now. The question is whether or not we'd have any control over it. And we do have to think about, I mean, we actually have a fair deal going on here to where the actual, oh, what was I going to say? The actual, um, oh, I'm gonna kill it there. That's not a bad place to stop, but the actual, thingamajigger, the, hitting the moon without patch conics is a bit of a problem. We could sort of do the calculations and sort of eyeball it if we are very careful. But it's not really something that is easily done otherwise. Let's pull up our contracts real quick. The one that's coming up almost immediately is the LV909. And I'm just going to time warp through this. One of the problems with being as low as we are, I'm just going to go up to 100 here, that we could circularize later on. One of the problems with being as high as we are is that we do not have much in the way of vertical velocity, so we're stuck down here for a while. I do want to keep this about 83 or so. As this is the maybe not the optimal deal. If I'm gonna go up to 90, I think we should lose the rest of this through drag. We just want to make sure whatever it is that we do, that we end up able to recover from this. I think we'll be okay here. Maybe just a little bit more will do it. We'll go for 84. And hope that the drag is not too much of an issue. Because if we look at this other contract, we need to be between 80k and 87k. So that's actually not too bad of a deal here, as long as we can keep ourselves going. But for now, let's look at the gear, because we can always come back to anything else. And we're about to hit the target that we want to. And we are now above the atmosphere. So we got the LV909, which gives us another 9k. That's not a bad place to start. However, now that we've done that, we need to raise our apoapsis so that we are in orbit. And we're not going to do an insanely huge deal with this. But I think we'll be okay if we just get a little bit closer to this. There we go. Let's test that gear bay. And that's already brought us up to more than enough for what we need. I think, maybe around here would be appropriate for us to burn. And we're fairly low, so I'm going to give us about 37k or so. That should get us close to the KSC. Let's just retract that landing gear. I think Lubin is going to be fairly... But we actually passed the desert, I think. Hopefully. Then again, I think we will probably land in the desert. I did not hit that just correctly. But that's okay, because we'll be getting a little bit extra back from this. And even If we don't, we will get more science, which is very welcome. I don't think anybody can complain about having too much science. So we are coming in over the desert right now. And we have plenty of fuel to spare at this point. And I wouldn't be surprised if we landed right in that desert. In fact, I'm going to shoot for that because that is science data that we could use. And you know what, why not pop the parachutes? Then again, I may have been a little bit premature about that. We're landing in the bay instead. We're still probably going to get about 80%, so I'm not so irritated by that. Let's grab ourselves a crew report. We have flying over the water. Maybe not the best landing I've done, but I think it'll be okay. For now, I'm just going to throttle back time acceleration and let those parachutes deploy so that poor Lubin does not meet an untimely death. And it appears we have quite a bit more in the way of parachutes than we actually need. This is probably going to be the softest landing any astronaut has experienced in a while. So there we go. We have a ton of contracts that we can now complete. Amongst them, these guys here. I'm going to go ahead and upgrade the launch pad while we're at it so we can do heavier missions. And that'll be important for us. As for contracts, we have 3 now. Radial parachute is worth 3 science, so I think we will take that. These guys are not really worth it, so I'm going to get rid of them. As they don't really offer much, but I think we should think of rescuing Zhoning, or whatever his name is, as a potential goal. And I think we can take the 9,000 from here as well. And that will leave us with the next goal, I think, is the tracking station, which will give us patched conics. This, of course, will be very useful to us. Astronaut Complex may be good too, because we do want the ability to EVA and to grab more Kerbals. And then this guy over here, I don't really have any plans for commitments so far. But I do want to show you, well, first of all, I guess we should do some upgrading here. I do want to show you, despite that, something that I think will help us in the pursuit of science, and that is these plane parts. Previously, you might have actually gotten something along the lines of, oh, I don't know, maybe like maybe you would have gotten the fuel lines first. But the plane parts are actually very useful now since there are contracts. As we can see that let us perform visual surveys. And I'm going to take this real quick because I think we could use the money. If we look at our tracking station, not the launch pad, but the tracking station, you can see all of these are clustered up in one area. This part, however, is going to be a little bit more difficult to pull off, so we're going to have to develop our planes as a result. I think all of those are above the surface, though, so if we can get something over there, then I don't think we can complain. It's just a matter of touching down in the right spot. So I think what we'll do is we will get this VTOL going. We happen to have a plane, but it's not really just any plane. It's a VTOL because, as it turns out, the Kerbals have not invented wheels yet. They can invent rockets, but wheels are beyond their grasp. So what we can do here is we can go to Hattery's core first. And what we want to do... Oh! That is no good. And who did I kill? Bill should not have snuck in there. As much as I like Bill, I have no sympathy for him. And unfortunately, because we were recording, I will have to keep that. That leaves, I guess, we have an engineer. I want another pilot that'll give us Bob and Gilfrey. And I think I'm going to put Tudsy in this role because, honestly, I think a pilot would be better here. Oh no. What happened here? Why do they keep on You know, Tedsy was supposed to be scheduled for this. Let's try again. Hopefully Bob will not sneak out. Now, I've found that it is actually quite useful to have a number of scientists, or a number of pilots, rather. I know we're going to be somewhere up here. Oh, we'll go over here for now. I have a feeling I'm going to regret. Oh, no. Hetery's core, there we go. Let's bring up the gear. The basic idea here is that we're going to get this guy to fly over Hattery's core, and then we'll do the remaining ones as that opportunity arises. Perhaps flying control would be good here as well. Now for this we need to be under 16,000, I believe. And we probably want for Tedsy to not go too much farther. As it turns out, this is probably the best way without wheels to get to where we want to go. Now, unfortunately, with this particular contract, we have a bit of a problem. And we have a bunch of landings to pull off. However, we can always get some of the other contracts as well. And you know, I think we'll do that. There's no reason after accepting all of these not to get as much out of this one plane as possible. There is plenty of fuel on it after all. There's another thing to notice too as we get closer, and this will get very confusing. This guy will move up. You might be tempted to match altitude with it, but I can assure you this is a mistake. So we will have some 3 EVA reports. I'm thinking GPR and JQ is probably going to be the easiest to get. And as far as this guy up here, we just need to be ready. So let's get ready to take that one crew report. There we go. We have a crew report above the Highlands. What about Netto Succession? I think we were pretty close to that. So let's fly to it. And the rule there is above. Okay, that may be a little bit harder than I thought it was. We'll go to Zone Alpha. And one thing I've learned here is that we will have to be very careful with this because, as it would turn out, it's very easy to overshoot these zones. So ideally, we're coming in as low as possible so we can slow down. And also as slowly as possible. And that's the way that we should approach this. I'm going to bleed off some velocity here. And when we get close, I'm actually going to slide on in. And I found the trick is with this that if you overshoot, you don't really want to change your heading as much. Because that makes it a lot more difficult to land. I mean, you're not going to land on point, unfortunately. And if we had wheels, then we could just taxi to the point in question. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And we have no action groups, so to speak of, so... Unfortunately, that's not much of an option for us. I'm just going to bring down our engine power as much as possible so that the chutes can take care of the rest. And that will lead to the kind of landing that we are looking for, perhaps. We'll just shut down the engine. Well, you may be tempted to turn around here, and that seems to be the wrong thing to do. Because as it turns out, we can actually walk to the sky. However, I do want to get a crew report, except we already have one. And we won't be far. We also have landing legs here, so that will help. And it looks like we may come down relatively flat, which is good news for us. No, don't overwrite that crew report. Let's just take an EVA and take the data. We'll take an EVA report, stick it in here, we'll take another crew report, and then we'll leave this guy behind, as we are interested in much better things. And this is where time warp becomes incredibly useful. I mean, aside from knocking your plane over and such. So I will come back to you when I'm close to the point, and I will presume then. Okay, we just entered the zone, and I'm going to go ahead and take me an EVA report here. While we're at it, oh, okay, that's not quite what I wanted to do. I wanted to do physical time warp. You know, we might as well go looking for the other zone since it's close by. I mean, we get the same amount of science either. Whoa. Okay. Well, let me go back to the Space Center real quick. This is a bug that happens with my mouse. Let's try this again. Oh, where are we? We're at Tedsy Kerman. He's been walking around for maybe an hour or two. He's been hovering over the ground too. Let's set beta as a target. And let's just zoom in, see where we're at. We've got, for some reason or another, we have a a trajectory of some kind. So what we can do here is we can hold down shift and wander on over here. I'm fairly confident we should be pretty close to the zone. This does take a while, however. I mean, we are over 2 kilometers away from the craft, but this will free up any... it'll free up at least one contract, which we could possibly use on better things. So there's, for instance, a contract that'll help us get newer parts into orbit, maybe parts that we could not yet afford for some reason or another. Let's just check our heading. We could probably go to the right a little bit. I think we'll be up here before too long. I guess one of the things about being an astronaut is that you have to be able to walk these long distances. But at any rate, I think we'll be just fine if we're okay. A rover probably would have been better, but we don't have any rover parts. So I'll tell you what, I will see you back whenever I am ready to pick the stew back up, and I will see you then. Okay, so I'm back. We're now on the edge of the zone here. I apparently missed the message that says we're in it, but let's just throttle back time warp a little bit. Overwrite that EVA report. And we now have Highland science. Let's recover this dude. He's been through enough. He's been walking for about an hour and 30 minutes. But, let's also recover this craft, which will give us back a little bit more money as well. So, 10,000 funds, good enough for me. Hable's Expanse, Sean's Cannery is doing that. This is actually... Oh, which one is this? This one isn't too bad. These guys here are a little bit harder than I thought they'd be. Let's just take a look at the contract there. See if there's really anything interesting in terms of contracts. We could test a skipper. I think that would be a good thing to do. Oh wow, we're already 110,000. Those do tend to work pretty well, don't they? I think we will take that just for its own merits. And we have 5 hours to test this guy, so we will do the radial decoupler. And then Harsel's bulge. We need to take a look at that. That's another one we could do, but those are below, so I think that's actually not a bad one to do. We can take that for sure. And that's in another 1 day or so. Let's test the skipper engine then. It just needs to be on a suborbital trajectory. And that suborbital trajectory is... where exactly? 74,000 meters to 77,000. There's no reason to risk a Kerbal on this. I believe the skipper does have an alternator in it. So let's take this engine and see. I think we could get to the target fairly easily. Though we may need to do some really crazy stuff here in order to afford that. First of all, I don't want to run out of juice on the dill. We could actually use this as well as an opportunity to gain high atmosphere science as well. I think, for what it's worth, this guy will be very easy. If we look at this thrust, for instance, I think it'll be very easy for us to... Oh, well, that's not what I meant to do. Let's try that again. It'll make the majority of our deal, and we will not have SAS to benefit us. However, I think that we should have no problem because this engine has a thrust of 650, which I believe should mean that we can thrust this down to like a third and still get off the ground, as we don't weigh all that much. We just have to make sure that whatever it is we do, oh, look at the... That's actually kind of neat. I like that. But whatever it is that we do not overdo it. Now, we do not have any guidance whatsoever on this. To think, if we are careful, we can get this up to the proper deal here. That just needs to be on a suborbital trajectory, so we will add a stage below this. We are beginning to tilt. And this is part of the difficulty with something like this. It's difficult to estimate how much fuel we will need. Oh, that is not looking good. I'm going to use the rest of this to try and get us out of the atmosphere. Probably in vain. Will we make it? Most decidedly not. Let's at least grab some of the science here. Oh, we're still flying. Let's get into high atmosphere, which I think is pretty close. Upper atmosphere, we have that. Well, we are beginning to descend, so let's at least allow that to happen. It turns out a little bit more fuel is not a bad idea. And we aren't going to recover everything, unfortunately, but we will recover a fair bit. And I think that despite this, we have made a fairly decent advance here. We will just have to be a little bit careful. Now, as for what will come next, I'm not sure. Astronaut EVAs are fairly important, and they will help us get a lot of science. Unfortunately, I'm not sure to what degree they will help us in that regard. Let's try this one more time. Because we do have a fair amount of science to get here. Or at least if not science, then, other things that resemble science. Yeah, well, I'm just gonna put on another long fuel tank like that. And I'm gonna make this guy the root part. Not that it really matters. Let's try this once again. We do not have enough. Whoa. Okay. Not quite what I had in mind. That was an expensive little experiment, too. At least... Oh, there we go. Did we get anything back? We got the Stay Put Nick back. I mean, at least it was unmanned. Let's increase our thrust just a little bit. At this point, I'm more concerned about us getting out of the atmosphere than anything. And this is the part where our residual velocity is going to come back to bite us. Because we actually have to, in some way, control for it. We do at least have the gumbling that would be necessary for us to get out of this. Because without the gumbling, this would be a bit of... Oh, yeah, this would be a bit of an issue. We have no reaction wheels otherwise. And this is the thing about this probe that makes it quite irritating. Let's see. How far up are we? We're 108, so we can hit this, I think, quite easily. So what's the deal here? 74 to 76. I believe we can do that. Let's test this engine here in a bit. And we're at the proper altitude. So we won't get above our target here. And we will just have to let this thing descend on its own. We are already fairly off course. And you can see at the speed we're coming in that this could be a bit of a problem. As right now we're behaving like a pendulum. And we may lose some parts, depending on how close we are to the KSC. But on the flip side, we've almost got enough for landing wheels, which I am definitely looking forward to. I mean, I think landing wheels are a very important target because of the fact, anyhow, that we can make proper planes with them, and that's what we want. That'll make our dream of going to the moon a reality. The question will have to be, now that we've unlocked some of these parts here, what exactly is it that we want out of this? I mean, I personally think that a probe around the moon might be good if we can hack it, but I understand that it's not the easiest thing for us to do, and we are landing on a slope, which I guess at least we can recover that debris. I did not collect the science, so that's a loss there. What if we collect that debris? It's okay. Let's just take a look and see if we got anything new in the way of contracts, and then I may do one more. Radial decoupler and flight over Kerbin. I think this is probably a good place for us to stop, at least in terms of, deciding of what to do. I definitely think that, well, let me unroot this. I think that in terms of bang for buck here, we're doing pretty well. We are beginning to turn quite a bit of profit, although that's with the understanding that we also happen to have a deal, quite a deal in fact, of outstanding contracts. So that's something to think about. That's not really too much of a problem, though. We've got this decoupler here that we're going to test. And we've also got the radial parachutes to test as well. And we have a reasonable expectation that we may end up with these guys on the launch pad as well, or at least close to the launch pad. So I'm not going to fire these guys yet. Our first contract we're going to do is maybe not the radial, although we need to maintain, yeah, the radial decouplers are there. We need to maintain about the same parameters for that. So why not? Let's go ahead and get this guy here. That is a little bit too much in the way of thrust, I think. I think we can get some science out of this as well. the hard part, I believe, is going to be... Oh, we have to be going really fast, though. Which means we'll have enough energy, I think, to satisfy these requirements. It's a rather unusual set of requirements, if I say so myself. We do need to get up to altitude here. I guess there's nothing that really beats the real thing. But I think we're doing okay, and we will have, if nothing else, we will have plenty of ability to land here. We're about to reach apoapsis, so let's let the Earth rotate underneath us. And let's just let the parachutes do the rest. This would normally not be a very good idea, what we're doing. Just let this thing bounce out for a bit. It's dampening just a little bit, which is a good sign. And I don't believe we've gotten a sample from the ocean yet, so this may be a bit fortuitous. But, we're more or less about where we want to be with this. We'll just hope for the best when the sky topples over, because it will topple over, I'm fairly sure. Despite the speed at which it's moving. And after that, I think we'll call it a day. Well, there we go. Oh, materials bay broke again. Some wasted money. And of course, now it's giving me this weird thing to where it can't recover the vessel. Well, I suppose that'll have to do for now. I'm just going to recover that debris. Unless it's already been recovered automatically. And we're going to accept some of these contracts. Which one do we have? We had LVT-45 for another science data around carbon. That one is good to do. And these guys, I believe, are doable with our present technology. So I'm going to take that. And when we come back next time, we're going to decide how to spend this money. And particularly, how we are going to spend some of the science as well. So until then, this has been Thy Lord Root, and I will see you later.